Hey everyone, you tired of the mixed messaging, the mixed signals you're getting from the central planners on a regular basis now? CBC News Business, just when you think, right? Depends on the article and depends on the day. On one side, they're always saying, oh, look how good Canada's economy doing. Oh, we're doing great. Oh, look at, there's all these countries around the world aren't doing nearly as good as Canada. Canada's doing great. Our economy's humming along. We're growing at, whatever, such percent, right? In reality, they won't tell you. Well, every once in a while you get a hint that those GDP numbers are basically all based on speculative wealth, which is the speculative increase in the values of the homes, because that's how people are finding their ways to spend out and create this false wealth in the GDP. They're born against the speculative increase in the wealth in their homes. But yet, here today we are with Stephen Pola as the central banker for Canada, updated out of the CBC News Business. Uncertain outlook keeps Bank of Canada firmly on the sidelines for now. So even after all this, like when did the crash start happening? 2008, late 2007, 2008. So you're looking at 9 years later. And they've been at rock bottom as far as interest rates. So just constantly trying to stimulate and entice people to spend money to stimulate the economy, all this growth, right? But what are you seeing out there on the landscape, right? Are you yourself benefiting from all this central planning and this printing of money and reducing the purchasing power of the currency of the dollar, Canadian dollar? No, you're not benefiting from that. But the stock market, the speculators in the stock market, they are, real estate brokers and execs, right? Those in the housing market that are making off like bandits, right? They are. But the average consumer or the young millennials that are trying to move into these homes or trying to get a job, none of this is panning out very good for those of you, are they? But yet, like I say, they constantly talk up the economy of Canada as if we're doing so great. Well, if we're doing so great, why the hell after all these years, 7 years, 9 years later, actually, after the economic crash in the U.S., and they tried to say that Canada, we staved it, right? We didn't have to suffer it. But yet, if we're doing so good, why the hell are we stuck at these rock bottom interest rates where the government and the central banks are trying to stimulate the economic growth in any way they can? That mixed messaging, I don't even care how economically or financially literate you are, that should tell you something. When somebody's speaking out both sides of their mouth, you should at least recognize immediately, instinctively, even if you don't understand either side of the equation, you should wonder, are we doing good or are we doing bad? It can't be both. Either the economy is growing and doing good, and Canada, we're so prosperous, and that's the psychology, right? They're trying to give you the psychology. Hey, we're doing great, so get out there and spend, right? That part of it they seem to be doing fairly well at. But the other side of it is the money that you're spending isn't money that you created out of actually producing real wealth in the economy. It's just you're borrowing. They're just giving you credit cards or increasing levels or, this speculative increase in your house and you're borrowing against it. Yeah, but eventually at some stage of the game, you're seeing this rampant growth of not wealth, but debt. So there's two ways that you can increase prosperity. That's through wealth creation or by this false speculative and pretense of wealth and creation called debt. And that's the part that most Canadians don't seem to understand the difference or be able to discern the difference between the two is, creating real wealth where you've got a storage of value that built up over time and then you spend that in the economy. Well, that's real wealth that's being spent. That's real growth. There's an underlying fundamental and foundational aspect of that kind of growth. But when you're just borrowing against the future to produce a speculative wealth or a pretense of wealth in the here and now, well, that just means, yeah, you can enjoy it in the here and now, but later you're going to suffer the consequence. Just like, if you put a needle in your arm of heroin, you're going to enjoy the high now, but the ultimate consequence and cause and effect correlation with that is you're going to have to suffer the down afterwards. Right? You're going to have to come down that high sometime. Now, the central planners are saying, no, we never have to come down. Let's just keep that needle in our arm permanently. But you know what happens if you keep that needle in your arm permanently, right? Well, you're going to fucking die. You're going to OD. No economy, no human, no situation historically for humans at any stage of the game, economically or socially. There's never been any time historically, and there'll never be any time in the future where you can keep the needle in your arm forever and expect it's going to turn out to be good. Never going to happen. Let's get down and read a little bit into this article from CBC. The Bank of Canada kept its benchmark interest rate steady on Wednesday, but signaled that could change once the weak U.S. economy starts to rebound as expected through the latter part of the year. So they're even admitting right now what we're relying on suckling on the U.S. tit, right? That's basically what they're saying. We have to rely on the U.S. growing and then we'll be okay. Meanwhile, like I said, the Americans are saying, just like with the housing crash, they're like, okay, we're going to fucking weed through all this malinvestment and weed out all this bullshit. They went through the pain. They ripped the Band-Aid off in 2008. Canadians are like, well, we don't want to rip the Band-Aid off. We're just going to hope that we can go along, even though we're pretending that we're growing better than the U.S., but we're still relying on the U.S., right? I mean, like I said, it's like some fucking kid, right, that's got a paper route and trying to tell their parents that both have full-time jobs is, don't worry, I'll tell you how to do things, right? Wouldn't that fucking sound stupid? Well, that's what Stephen Bolas is trying to say. Idiot. Canada's central bank kept its target for the overnight rate steady at 0.5% on Wednesday, the same level it's been at since the middle of 2015 because the economy isn't showing any signs of needing any more or any less stimulus. All things considered, the bank judges that current degree of monetary stimulus is appropriate at present, the bank said in a statement. So monetary stimulus. So, right? So rather than real demand in the economy, the stimulus means is we'll just make fake stimulus. That's what stimulus means. You got to understand the terms, like I always say. Define the terms. What does stimulus mean? It means if you're not spending money in the economy, it's the Keynesian model. The government will do it for you. But meanwhile, it's like, well, if you don't have money to spend in the economy, how can the government spend on your behalf, right? Think about that. Does that make sense to you? It sure as fuck don't to me. If I'm broke, I'm broke. Doesn't mean someone else can go out and spend on my behalf and somehow I'm going to get rich. No, it just means you're going to put me in fucking debt further, and I didn't even ask for that debt. It means you're forcing that debt on me, even though I would be smart on my own and say, I'm not taking any more debt. But the government say, no, we're going to make sure you take on more debt regardless of what you want. We're going to force you to take more debt, right? Well, fuck that shit. Like I say, they think that they're going to keep this shit going, and those bond buyers that think that these successive generations are going to be stupid enough to pay off these long-standing debts. You're fucking crazy. I sure as fuck aren't. And I'm teaching my kids to never pay them. So all these bond buyers, when you're buying those long-term bonds, you're throwing your money in the fucking garbage, what you're doing, because like there's nobody going to be paying your debts, right? These kids and grandkids aren't going to be paying off their grandparents' debt. Sorry, hate to burst your bubble, but that's just the reality. That's just the truth of the matter. If you're too stupid to recognize that at this stage of the game, well, hey, like I've said in a couple other videos, I got some oceanfront property in Arizona I want to sell you. Look me up. The bank cited lower inflation caused by cheaper food as a factor in staying on the sidelines, but said it expects that to change soon. And the U.S. economy at the start of the year on a weak note will likely strengthen and rebound the second quarter, the bank said. That should provide a shot in the arm to Canadian exports. Like I say, parasites just waiting for someone else to grow their economy so we can latch on, right? Fuck, learn how to do that shit yourself, Canada. Take care of yourself. Jesus Christ, then you don't have to rely on everyone else around the world. Which may require a change to the bank's lending rate. Generally speaking, the bank hikes its rate when the economy is heated up too much and slashes the rate when it wants to stimulate the economy. Most economists expect the bank to stay on the sidelines until 2018 before tinkering with interest rates. But let me tell you right now, these central planners that think they can keep it up, and they might very well be able to do that, but I mean, it's just prolonged. It's just extending and pretending for what, another year or so? But in reality, if the central bank in the U.S., if the Fed, if Janet Yellen starts to creep those interest rates up because they're having pressure from people like Trump and those, the actual macro economists that are actually a little bit free market oriented. If they're feeling the pressure down there and the interest rates go up, let me tell you, you need to learn the cause and effect correlation between the U.S. Fed's interest rate and because of the U.S. currency being the world's reserve currency and every other currency be pegged against it and how bonds and stocks work. You need to learn these fundamentals to understand that, Stephen Polas can talk as much smack about keeping the interest rates as low as he wants, as much as he wants. But in reality, if the U.S. starts ramping up rates, well, you're going to see a massive, that divergence will not happen. Canada will never be able to stay in this fucking retarded situation with this ridiculous false stimulus with the needle in the arm when the economy of the U.S., if it actually starts growing the U.S., I'm sorry, but no one in Canada, none of these business fucking leaders or the business community are going to stay here and just say, oh, we're going to stay up here going broke all the time while the U.S. is going to increase because they have interest rates. Because think about an investor. Or think about someone who would actually want to use some of their used up or their accumulated capital. Are they going to want to lend that or invest? Oh, not without a return. And how do you get a return? Oh, interest rates. So the investors, the people with the money that are sitting on the sidelines are never going to invest in the Canadian economy if they realize there's no return on their investment. Meanwhile, the U.S. will be saying, here's all kinds of return. Look, because we're ramping our rates back up. So any decent, intelligent businessman or woman is never going to want to play games in this Canadian economy if the American economy actually does start growing, because the Canadian economy is completely, as they're even admitting here, is completely reliant on what happens whether in US or Europe. They've outsourced so much of everything we do in Canada to all these different geographical areas that, like I said, Canadians are just, for the most part, the essential planners are just like parasites suckling on the teat of those countries around the world that actually have the free market fundamentals to learn how to, weed out the bad malinvestments and try to ramp up the growth model once again. Welcome to the race to the bottom, and Stephen Poloz is leading that charge. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.